So last time we talked about government, 3 spheres. We got the what? We got the family, the church, and the state. Okay, good. Now, inside of those spheres, each one has specific responsibilities, and we talked about this so much, so we should all have this perfectly memorized by now. But the responsibility of the state, for example, is to do what? Do what? To punish evil. To punish evil. That's right. The state wields the sword, as the Bible puts it, for those who rebel against the law of God. Specifically, we see that played out whenever Noah gets off the boat and comes and attacks, and we have to deal with all those. If somebody comes under attack or under assault, their life is forfeit as a result of it, all those pieces. The responsibility of the church is to do what? Do y'all remember? Do what? Proclaim, right? And not just the state, right, but to all people, right? But we do proclaim to the state. That's probably the one that should stick the biggest in our heads, because I think that's the one we forgot about the most, honestly. And then the responsibility of the family is to do what? What's the responsibility of the family? Is to dance. Very good. The responsibility of the family is to, really be a family. But one of the key responsibilities inside of being a family, look, your sister's here to collect you. Go with your sister because you love her. One of the key responsibilities within the family, don't forget your donut. Your donut. Don't forget. All right, there we go, we got it. One of the key responsibilities within the family sphere is to raise godly kids, educate. So now I want to spend several weeks, and I think it's appropriate because school just started and all the kids are going back, and everybody's thinking about education right now, so I think it fits well. But education, we say this all the time, is not just about educating, it's about formation. And historically, throughout the world, it has always been understood to be so. Only recently have we decided that education is about facts and skills. That is not an education. That is a very, very shallow understanding of what education actually is. Education is to form a human being. One of the pithy ways that we say it is education is formation. And that's where we're living for probably the next 4 or 5 weeks in Sunday school. Talking about how to fully form a human being. And this matters a lot because if you read, I don't know if you guys like to read or listen to or whatever, biographies of great Christian leaders and preachers and things like that, you get a real clear sense that their upbringing was crucial to who they turned out to be. C.S. Lewis, for example, his dad hired a tutor to follow C.S. Lewis around all day and teach him. But he didn't just teach him facts and skills. He taught him the right way to think. He taught him the proper way of the world. Like, for example, so C.S. Lewis is out walking. I think they were going to a shop or something like that together one day with his tutor. And as they're walking down the street, C.S. Lewis, in desperate attempts to break the awkward silence, I'm sure, that they were walking down the street to, says, well, it's a lovely day, isn't it? And his tutor said, what makes it a lovely day? And Lewis was like, I don't know. The weather's nice. Why is the weather nice? I don't know. It's not raining right now, because they're in England where it rains all the time. And the sun's out, the skies are blue. Why is blue good and clouds bad? You drive down, and that's the Socratic method. If you guys aren't familiar with that, you press in really hard in the questions, and you make sure that you're reasoning all the way through the particular argument. I'm not endorsing Socrates here, but the Socratic method, I think, is a fun application here for us to be able to reason and think well. The point being, because of who C.S. Lewis's tutor was and who his upbringing was, we have the Chronicles of Narnia. Okay? We have Mere Christianity. We have, pick the book. And it has, those texts have greatly informed and shaped all of Western Christianity as a result, because of who he was, because of the way in which he was formed. You see what I'm saying? So it is crucial for us to be thinking of education not as facts and skills, not as merely instructing someone in how to accomplish a goal, not in merely career path, but we're forming a human being, okay? That's what education really is. And realistically, true education doesn't cease. Now, it is true that as a child grows up, there are less and less, what would be the good word? No, porous is the wrong word. Malleable, there it is. They're less and less malleable. They're less and less formable, right? When you got a little bitty kid, they're like sponges. They're soaking everything up, and you're shaping their whole world in like big, broad swaths because they don't know anything. Right? Their first words are being learned. The way that they interact socially with other people is being learned. The categories of respect and honor are being formed in their head, like as young as 1 year old. All those things are happening, and those kids are incredibly shapeable. But whenever they pass about the 3-year-old mark, parents, y'all have noticed this, whenever they pass about the 3-year-old mark, it's less clay and more... I wouldn't say rock at 3. I'd say less clay and maybe more like a bendable piece of plastic, right? And maybe I'd say it more like that. Like you can still instruct it, you can still train past 3, but that malleability, that shapeability is grossly less. Now, I'm speaking in generalities here, so, don't be like, well, I've observed that it's actually 4.5. Just relax. And then as we move older, around the age of 6 or so, we see that now we're getting into a little bit more the rocky kind of phase. And then by the time that they're past 10, who they are as a human being is pretty much established. Their habits, their core, the way that they function as a person, it happens a lot earlier than we think, right? Happens a lot. This is largely why the state wants access to your children at birth. Did you know that? That's a new thing that's going on. The Head Start programs that operate in your parish, by the way, want your kids from birth to 4 years old. Yes, facts. And if you reach certain brackets, you can enroll your kids, and they will have them for you however long you need them to have them. I think it's 8 to 5 is the largest window during the day. And then who will shape your kids? Not you. But the Bible makes it clear. Who has the primary responsibility of educating a child? It's the family. That's one of the core centers of the family. Deuteronomy 6, verses 6 through 8. It says, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes." Now just think about all that with me for just a second. That's not just memorize these facts, there's a test on Friday. That's not at all what that is. That is so Deuteronomy 6, the context here is the commands of God, the laws of God. They are a part of your family's culture. That's what he's saying. He's saying, you will talk and teach these commands diligently to your children, and you're going to do it when you're sitting at your house in the low points of the day. When you're together. You're going to do it when you're walking by the way, meaning as you're living life, as you're just casually operating in any different variety of way. You're going to do so when you lie down and when you rise. The way you start and end the day is with these commands. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Even a part of your garments, even a part of the clothing that you wear is informed by the commands of God. Why? Because it shapes who you are. It shapes and changes who you are. So when we talk about the concept of education, okay, we are not just discussing memorize these, there's a test on Friday. But I think catechism's great. And I think that we should be catechizing our kids. And I pitched that idea not too long ago, and it didn't go over well to do it in this church service itself. So we're working on finding ways to incorporate catechism into church life, into corporate church life too. I think it's going to be a lot of fun once we do it. I think catechism is important. I think Bible memorization, is obviously important. Yes, there are elements of fact and knowledge and remembrance and skill and things like that are important. But if we limit education to only those things, we've forgotten what education is, a true education. Now, let me ask you this. How do you think we got here? How do you think we got to the spot where we treat education as just facts and skills? Oh, okay. Standardized testing. What'd you say, buddy? You said something. No? A corporate. You are a monkey on a treadmill. You are a cog in the machine. All I need you to do is push this button when this happens, because I don't have an automation that can do that yet. Except now we do have automations that can do that, and it makes life strange. Standardized test. What was that? The mothers left the household. Yeah. Industrial revolution. Maybe we could say it that way. Pre-industrial revolution, the household was very household-centric. Like your family typically had a trade or a business. If you were pre-industrial revolution, like a middle-class type family, like the shoe cobbler. Okay. Well, in fact, we still have this in existence in Acadiana, although it's about to be dead. We have one institution that still functioned like this, and I think it still functioned like this a few years ago, but it might not actually be doing it anymore. Y'all ever been to Poop Art's Bakery before? Y'all know about Poop Art's down in Lafayette? Okay, so what was that? Yeah, it's the intersection of Kali Saloom and Pinhook, I think. Yeah, that's right. So Poop Art's, huh? Well, wherever it is. We got it. Wherever it is. Poop Arts is this really cool thing in Lafayette where, if you know this, the bakery is on the bottom floor, and what's on the top floor? Do you guys know? It's where old man Poop Art and his wife lived, and where they raised their kids. Now, that's a pre-industrial revolutionary style of living. They owned this building, and their family business was downstairs. And what do all the Poop Art boys do? Do y'all know still today? They're bakers. Well, some of them are more in the business management side, and some of them, and maybe there's a few of them that have left, but the family de Poupart, right? They have been in this trade because they set up their family in this particular style. Industrial Revolution showed up, and those types of skills were largely outsourced to factories, which meant what changed? Now you couldn't provide the same type of labor for a comparable price inside of that tiny little system. You had to go to work. And so that drove fathers first away from the home, which we still operate largely in this particular model today, and mothers would stay home. And then the feminist revival hits in the 40s and the 50s and the 30s, and then who left the house then? Moms did too. Moms and dads both left the house. Now who's left to take care of these kids? The state. You see the system? And then in the state's eye, we need to be efficient. We need to knock these things out. The public education system launches. Public education, by the way, in its initial creation was Christian, distinctly Christian. And in fact, Catholic schools exist in the United States not as a response to secular education, but as a response to Protestant education, because the public schools in the United States were initially so dang Protestant. They were doing catechism and they were doing Bible memory and all these things, and they were so dang Protestant that the Catholic schools started as a result. I'm not making this up. Study your history. It's wild stuff. Now today, the whole dynamics have shifted because our public Christian schools have... Remember when people used to make the big stink? They took prayer out of schools. Yeah, prayer was the last thing to go, bruh. They used to do Bible reading in classes. In fact, there are people alive who still remember doing catechism in their public school systems whenever they were little bitty kids. What is the chief end of man? Yeah, I'm not making this up. This is real life stuff. But we've lost all of that. Now, we've lost all of it because, I would argue, we have handed the reins of the formation of humanity to the wrong sphere. We've handed it to the state. You see how all these things work together to get us to that particular point? Bloop! And we've said, here, you form humans. And the state's terrible at it because they were never built for it. To make a human being, to form the shape of a human being, requires so much hands-on, detailed effort that it needs a mom and dad. It needs detail, it needs management, it needs curation, it needs moving and changing and adaptation based on where your kids are. You got to pay a lot of attention, it takes a lot of work. But to educate is not just facts and skills. To educate is everything that goes into forming a human being. This is why the state alone can't pull it off. What else is involved in the formation of your children right now? It's not just the state, but it's also what? The entertainment industry. What else? The internet, social media works, yeah? What else? We're going to talk about that actually in the sermon today. Idleness is the enemy of fruitfulness. We'll talk some more about that later. you think of anything else? What else is bent on educating your kids? How about their friend circles? Yeah. Social circles? Absolutely. You gotta make sure that your kids are exposed to the right types of friend circles. And you gotta make sure that they're heading in the right direction together. This is part of why I love having the academy, because we're able to look around the academy and say, I think by and large we're all on the same team. Okay, cool. We're gonna be all right. What's up, Peter? I could tell by who you associate with. Yeah, I think that's still true. But you see how all these things are outside of the family sphere. But who is ultimately responsible for which of these things have access to the family sphere? It's who? It's mom and dad, right? Mom and dad are the ones who are ultimately, you see, this is why we can say as Christians definitively, the family is responsible for the education and formation of a kid, and we can still do it too. Because so far we're not growing kids in test tubes and plugging them into the matrix, yet. It hasn't happened yet. But I'm sure that something like that will be the next temptation on the horizon. Already the state has said out loud that they are our kids, not your kids. They belong to us. No, they don't. They belong to the Lord, and the Lord has given stewardship of them to us as parents, as individuals. Now, let's say that your kid is past that formative set of years. Is it too late? No, it's not too late. We serve a God of grace. We serve a God of grace. And he can catch you up real fast. I was 18-year-old when I got saved. And I didn't know nothing. And I didn't have a rock-solid family by any means. We were just out living life. And the Lord was able to help and bring me along in a pretty considerable way, in a pretty fast way. Now, there was a lot of lessons that I had to learn with lumps along the way, right? And that is a method of instruction, and we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But we need to understand that education is the family's responsibility, and it's not just facts and skills. It's not just facts and skills. It is all of life. It is literally forming a human being. Education is much more than book learning, although it's certainly not less. Part of our problem is that we have decided that education can be secularized. That's part of our problem, okay? Because whenever you secularize education, what does that really mean? If I take all of the belief systems out of education, what's left? If I take all of the presuppositions of humanity, if I take all the belief systems, if I take all the presuppositions out, what's left in education? Nihilism? Well, probably ultimately, yes. What else? What's left? What's the only thing that can be left? Well, nothing, yeah, but you can hold on to a couple of things for a little bit, which are facts and skills. You see? Now, David's hinting at, and we all know that this is true too, that without God, 2 + 2 doesn't actually make 4, as the secularists have tried to prove to us already. But since we're Christians, we say, no, 2 and 2 do make 4, because reality exists, and we can move on from there. But if we tried to secularize it, the temptation would then be to say, oh, well, it's all just facts and skills. It's all just memorization of rote information, and then it's the acquisition of a certain amount of skills as you grow up and lead through life. We've deluded ourselves into thinking that education can somehow simply be an instructions of facts, skills, analysis, and systems, but that's just not the case. And this is partly why the enemy has been winning the war in the United States for the last 100 years, is because we've convinced ourselves that it could be. And that's why we have joyfully sent our children away to government-run schools to be brainwashed, because we got deluded into the idea that an educational system could go without teaching a worldview. And that's just not true. An educational system, no matter what, will instruct in worldview. It will teach a worldview. Do y'all know when I say worldview, do you know what I mean? What do I mean? Somebody hit me. What do I mean by a worldview? How you interpret things? Oh, sorry, that was Wade. Okay, I got it. How you interpret things, yeah, how you interpret things. So a belief system, presuppositions, you could say it that way. A worldview, the way in which you view the world, if you want to flip the word to create your definition right there. David, you want to say something, I could see you're like, okay, good. Do you have something you'd like to add? Because this is kind of your bread and butter. Including 2 plus 2 is 4. You assume that reality exists in order to say 2 plus 2 is 4. But whenever we get into the metaverse nonsense that keeps trying to take over the world right now, we can say, well, maybe it doesn't, though. What about that cat and the shadow and the giant? I can't remember what it is. Some type of turbine engine. Ted, you were going to say something? The tint of the glass through which you look. Oh, I like that. What kind of lens you are beholding the world through. And those would be, like David was saying, your presuppositions, your assumptions, all those different pieces. And it is impossible to separate education from a worldview. It's absolutely impossible. I remember when I went to college back in the old days of 2004, when I went to college, I remember sitting in my classes, and I don't even think I was a Christian yet, actually, because I didn't get saved until the summer of my freshman year at college. So I think I was still a secularist. And I went in to my biology class, and I remember my biology professor pulling up all the evolution charts and phylum charts, you know what I'm talking about, and things like that, putting them up on the board, and in effect saying, this is why all you Christians are stupid. And I wasn't even a Christian then. But I remember looking at that and saying, something's wrong. I don't think you should be saying this in here, sir. So this seems wrong. But what was he doing? He was teaching his worldview. He was going for it. It was full court press for him, and he had a room full of, God forgive me for saying this, but dumb 20-year-olds that he could be impressionable upon and push in a particular direction. And that's what I'm trying to stress to us. There is no separation of education from worldview. It is not possible. Every type of education that you receive will have presuppositions and assumptions that go with it, no matter what. So your job as a mom and dad is to make sure that your kids are getting and developing the right presuppositions and assumptions before they get into the room, even if they need to argue with somebody in order to pull it off. But you don't dare ever believe that there is a secular, quote unquote, form of education. Secularism doesn't exist. It's like David said a second ago. Secularism, another way of saying it, is we've removed all forms of religion for this. There is no religion here. Well, that is not true. Religion is everywhere. LGBT is a faith-based religion. I don't care what you say. The transgender movement is a faith-based religion. I feel this way, therefore I am. That's a faith-based religion, okay? You can't get away from it. It exists everywhere, and it is in our societies now. Does that make sense, you guys? Do y'all have any questions about this before we kind of move on? I'm trying to really drill this down hard before I start moving into the next section here. Dana? I did too. Was it in Nashville? Oh, okay. Yours was probably cooler than mine then. Yeah. Hmm.
And that only 2% of parents with kids under the age of 13 have a good. And so, like that's what it was like. They did a specific study on worldview, and so I mean, no, essentially they had a questionnaire, and so you had to answer these like broad questions, and the way that you answered it would determine kind of where your worldview came from, and so that goes.
Your truth can be your truth, and my truth can be my truth. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just all the things. And if you think about it, people can't verbalize what their worldview is. They do still have one, but it's so mixed up from the cartoons that they watched as a kid and the books that they read. And they have this like really hodgepodge.
Right. Yes.
And they don't even realize that.
Right. Yep.
about it?
Well, because a worldview, I've heard it said somebody like this before, and I think this is appropriate. A worldview is caught, not taught. You can instruct, and you should instruct, but really your worldview, if you did it right, you don't even realize that it's there, right? It's almost just like it's the cream that holds the cake together. You don't see it because the icing on the outside is so pretty and well done, but it's the actual bonding agent of everything. That's if you've done it right, you know. Now, if you're reverse engineering everything like I had to do at 18, that was a lot. That was a lot of work. But if you're doing it right with your kids, they don't even know that it's happening. They just move forward like, well, of course God is God because He's God. Why would I have a question? This is why it's dangerous to treat your children like they're not in the covenant when they're living in your household as little kids. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, because if they're not in the covenant and you ostracize them, then they're going to want to find their own world. Y'all get what I'm saying? And so from the moment that kid's born, you're like, you're God's. See, look, the Lord promised. He said right here, He said, you belong to Him. So that's what's true. You're His, period. We're done, moving on. Does that make sense, you guys? So we gotta wrap those things up very clearly. And you do it with the arguments of the Scriptures. Somebody else had their hand up, and it was that way. Oh, Jane. Hi, Jane. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. So I would start by making a couple of blanket assertions that might make some people mad at me, and that's okay. I would start by saying a Christian should never send their kid to the public school system, like their little kid, right? I would make that blanket assertion. And I've made that blanket assertion before, and people get mad at me, and that's okay. And then I would slightly alter that assertion whenever we get to college age. Okay, so Christians should be sending their kids to Christian schools for K through 12, or they should be homeschooling their kids in a Christian education. Period. Full stop. No qualifiers. Like we're done. Now, if we're talking about college, that's a slightly different piece because if you want to be a doctor, right? Like, if you have the skills to go be a doctor, you have to go through the secular education system. And the truth of the matter is that we need Christian doctors. We do. And so if you've got a kid that's real smart and going to be able to hold their own whenever the secularists start coming at them, then I don't have a problem with you sending them into a secular education system to become a doctor. I think that's fine. Same principle would go with lawyers. Like, we need Christian lawyers. I'm just saying. And so we form them, we work hard to disciple them, we train them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, and then we ship them off. But you don't send somebody to become a Christian doctor or a Christian lawyer that might not come out of the secular education system a Christian. Do you get it? Like, they're not ready. They're not good to go. You want to make sure that you got somebody who's, Toby Sumter says it, you want them to be a troublemaker, right? You want them to be the person who, when the biology professor stands up in the front of the room and says, well, let me tell you how all you Christians are stupid. You got a Christian kid in the room who's got enough moxie to stand up and say, let me tell you how you're stupid. Who can go right back with them. I think that's good to have, and we should have that. Does that make sense, Jane? So I got qualifiers in there, and we're going to get to this more later, but that would be where I'd put it. Hey, Dave. Yeah, I thought I was explaining that. My methodology, whenever I'm dealing with people that I know are going to be very difficult for me to bring them along, is to say something intentionally a little provocative. Because I've found, and I don't do this because I want them to be mad at me. I do this because I've found that unless I make them a little mad at me first, I won't get through to them. I have played the nice guy for a long time, okay? And I have not seen fruit from the nice guy. But I have seen fruit from the, no, this is what's true, and I'm not moving. I've seen fruit from that. The Lord works through that. I have not seen him work through me not broaching a subject directly because I'm trying to be polite. Does that make sense? If I say things like, I say, I don't think that you should send no, I don't even say I don't think, probably most of the time. I say Christians should not send their kids to public education systems. Boom. And then we just let it ride and see what happens. Does that make sense, you guys? And then I see fruit on the backside. Now, granted, I'm ready to get steamrolled a little while right here, and that's okay. That happens. But fruit comes on the backside. Okay. Any other questions? We got more stuff to jump into here in a minute. Okay, great. So it's not just information and skills. The enemy knew this play and was running against us from a jump. But one thing that I did notice, and it's interesting, Dana, that you said that you guys went to a worldview conference, because I noticed about 10, 12 years ago that Christian schools were starting to wake up to this. Actually, it was probably more like 20 years ago by this point, because it was me and Myra Baker and Merida Brooks and John Weiss, I think. We went to a conference in Nashville, and it was Glenn Schultz, Kingdom Education. Y'all read that book, huh? Okay, so we went to, it was a little conference. There was like maybe 100 people there. It was like we had a room in the Lifeway building. That I don't even know if you call that a conference. But the whole pitch was exactly what we're talking about right now. Worldview, 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 worldview. And that started getting picked up by a large number of Christian schools in the United States. Kingdom Education, Glenn Schultz, like that kind of vibe that started going out. A lot of folks started paying more and more attention to it. But you know what happened? We screwed it up because our tactics were the wrong tactics. Instead of going after parents to kingdom educate their kids, we pointed it at the Christian schools. And guess what? It's not enough. Because the Christian school, apart from mom and dad, can't do anything. But I remember when I worked at Westminster probably like 15 years ago, y'all old school Westminster people, do y'all remember BWIs? Y'all remember those? BWI, Biblical Worldview Integrations. And we had to have one of those puppies. Do you remember, Dana? We had to have one of those written into every lesson. You still have that in there? They gave up on me putting it in effort because I think I just wrote the same thing after a little while. I was like, I don't know what else to put. I got like 1-year-olds pooping on themselves in my class. Like, I can't figure this out. First graders, sorry. And nobody actually pooped on themselves. Anyway, but I did have a couple of pee-pee incidents, I think. I know my wife did. No, with her kids. She taught with me at Westminster too. So when we were dealing with all of this, it was like we realized there was a problem. Everybody looked around and said, it's broken. We don't have kids who are picking up the worldview. Let's get the schools to do it. Wrong strategy. But see, to Westminster's credit, they knew it wasn't going to work, right? Because y'all remember, what's the mission statement of Westminster? To assist parents in the raising up of their children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. I'm very, very much summarizing, but that's the gist, right? To assist parents. Now, the problem was most of the parents didn't get it, and they weren't on the same team. And so it didn't land. And so the biblical worldview movement that happened in Christian education, by and large in the United States, I would argue in the late 90s and early 2010, it didn't take. The fruit didn't hit because a school on their own can't do it. It's a household model. That's the way God has set it up. So if you want to train your kids in the fear and admonition of the Lord, good, because you're the only ones that can. The responsibility unit for education is the family. And the school, independent of that family, can't do it. It doesn't matter if the parents aren't on the team. It won't work. So education is for the formation of a whole human being, front to back. And one of the most important parts of that is the way in which they view the world. Is their worldview. And worldviews are better caught than they are instructed. They should be instructed, but it's also about the habits and the culture of your family. In your rising up and in your lying down, in your walking about the way, you see what I'm saying? And all those things, in the way you dress, in the way you live, everything that you do is centered around this. Whenever we had Toby come down for the men's conference. I can't remember how long ago that was, like a year ago by this point or something like that. Last time he came down for the men's conference, he and I got to do a little podcast recording together. And I asked him, I was like, what's one of the things, let's say you got a family who's just trying to get started down this road, what's one of the things that they should do to get the ball rolling? And he was like, super simple, just read the Bible. Have a time where you sit down as a family and read a chapter out of the Bible. So if you're sitting there, like read it together. You sit down, you take it out, you read a little bit, you put it away. Now that doesn't mean, here's the temptation. Whenever I say read the Bible, some people hear me say that and they think that I mean, and exegete every verse. No, I don't mean that, right? I mean just sit down, open it up, read it, and maybe have a little discussion about one or two things that happened. The other day in our house, we're going through Genesis right now, and it was about how Rachel or Leah stole Jacob from the other one via her son's mandrakes. That was a fun conversation to have with the kids. But it was a little moment that we all got to kind of discuss and enjoy together. And then we closed the book and we put it up. Why? Because we're people of the Word. Do you see how the habit is more important, almost, than just the full opportunity of instruction? You get the full opportunity of instruction all the time. The teaching is important, but we're building a culture. We're building a habit in order to inform a worldview into our children. Do you get what I'm saying here? We want both things. Even if you're not having time to fully explain everything all the way, that's fine. But the rhythm of your family, this is a big, important piece. Peter?
I just wanted to say that your worldview is based upon God-given purpose.
Well, I think we might be using two different words. Yeah,
Like your purpose, your worldview is going to be formed to achieve whatever that goal is.
Yeah, maybe that's why the first question in the Westminster Catechism is, what is the chief end of man? What is it? Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. If you listen to the Brian Sauvé versions of those songs. But yeah, so yeah, I could see something like that. I could see that working out. All right. So, what we're really talking about is much more than school. Although school is a crucial part, we're talking about forming a whole human being through his life. And we're going to talk about several different pieces over the next several weeks. And I want to give you a little preview of each one. We're going to talk about culture, the culture of the home, the culture of your family. We're going to talk about instruction, which is the formal instruction aspect. We'll do a little bit on that too. We're going to talk about life experiences. Those are very formative for kids. I mean, don't you just think about it for a second. You remember some of the trips and some of the things that you did when you were little, and they had an effect on you, okay? Life experiences are very formative, and we're also going to talk about adversity, trials, because I bet you remember a lot of those in your life too, don't you? And those shaped you, and they shaped the way that you look at the world around you. So we're gonna go through each one of those things over the next several weeks and try to get an idea of how to incorporate the Bible and train us up as a whole person using those things: culture, instruction, experience, adversity, and trial. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you are instructing us so that we may instruct. Thank you so much that you are shaping us so that we may shape. Thank you so much that you have given us a biblical culture that we can incorporate into every aspect of our lives so that we may be formed as fully formed human beings that follow you and delight in you. Father, I pray that you would forgive us for the times when we have thought lightly about the topic of education and refuse to lean in and trust you in all of these things. Lord, as we are now getting ourselves back on course and trying to raise up our children truly in the fear and admonition of the Lord, I pray that you'd help us to do so. Let us build a joyful culture of experiencing who you are and what your word says and calls us to do. May we look to adversity with a smile on our face because of your grace and what you've done already for us. And may we eventually be fully formed in the image of Christ. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, see y'all in a few minutes.